Yeah, you also had some really fancy back end there. So I'm curious, how does New York Times in particular reach out to computer scientists? Because I know a lot of my colleagues and fellow students in the computer science department don't think about journalism or multimedia pieces first on their list of companies that they think they might go to.
Sure.
And I mean, there's some incredible work here that really requires advanced knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, really, I would say you're putting yourself in a great position. I mean, there's not that many people, it turns out. I thought there would be more. There's not that many people who are interested in computers and journalism. So we're reaching out by offering jobs. Like, I have a computer science degree, Tom has a computer science degree, John has a computer science degree. So, like, we're looking for people with computer science degrees on my team. But my team is also looking for people like Amy O'Leary, who has extensive NPR audio editing skills and no computer science, like, and things like that. So I'm not saying you have to do computer science. But in answer to your question, like, on Aaron Pilloffer's team, there are tons of computer scientists. There are Jake Harris, who, like, knows everything and its mom about Ruby, and, like, all kinds of things about, like, those kind of, and they're hiring people who are specifically geared towards that kind of thing. So I also know that Northwestern, the Medill School, has scholarships for computer scientists who want to do journalism. But I think the answer is that there's just not that many. Journalism and computer science are really different. And so it's the people who are, because we want journalists first. And we want people who know how to do computer science. But you really have to be interested in journalism to do our stuff, because otherwise you get bored. Otherwise the computer science, I just want to program. I just want to keep building stuff. Well, that's cool. But we would rather you do it, like, focus on journalism and to advance the journalism. But, I mean, we have an internship coming up. Aaron Pilloffer has spots on his team for you. Anybody else, like, contact me, contact our website. We are hiring people with those skills, absolutely.
Hi, my name's Daniel. I was just curious to know what is your usability testing process for kind of new tools that you build, and you're on a tight deadline. Like you said, you were always talking about buttons that are important and things like that. Like, do you just bounce? You build something and you just ask your colleagues, or do you bring in people off the street and test things out? Or
right off the street, just drag them off the street. No, it depends. It again depends on site-wide navigational frameworks or things like the election guide or things that are like large-scale projects. There is extensive user testing. That's done by a guy named Torben Brooks, who has people on his team. And they do all the usability type things. They set you down in front of a computer. They do eye tracking. They ask you questions. They do those things. For my projects, almost none of them get that, because we're creating things on a deadline that just can't. We don't have time to user test. So they depend on my knowledge and my experience with building these things. And then I ask Tom, I ask Andrew, who's done these things for 8-9 years, as long as they've been doing them. So for the quicker turnaround projects, for projects that our team works on a lot, there's almost no user testing. But I've done a lot of user testing in my life, so I tend to know a lot of the rules of it. So it's not like we could just put somebody in there and say, build whatever you want. Like, we inherently know some of the rules. But for the larger scale projects and the larger frameworks, they do as much tried and true user testing as you can do.
Okay. Hi, I'm Nadia. I'm a student here too. And I was really interested in some of what you discussed with transparency, how you're effectively creating these archives of hard-to-find documents in electronic form that are available to the public. And at the same time, it sounds like you're constantly advancing the kind of technology you're using to create these multimedia presentations. And I guess I was wondering, you're working on deadline, you're creating something that people can interact with now, but how much do you think about sort of the role of your multimedia presentations, like sort of for archival purposes, both recording the news and then also recording public opinion?
It's a great question. It's really wonderful to hear you guys thinking about these things, because these are things that you should be thinking about, and these are things that, like, we're just thinking about too. Like, so you're ahead of the curve. And in terms of that, like, we have started thinking about that more. At the beginning, like, we weren't thinking about that much. Like, a lot of the time, not as much now, but we'd run into projects where, like, let's start this project, right? And it'd be a project that takes a lot of, like, maintenance, or it takes, like, a lot of curating or stuff. And then, like, 2 weeks down the road, you want to start another project, you're doing something, but you still have this other project that you have to curate. And then all of a sudden, like, a month down the road, you have like 4 open projects, and you're like, oh my God, what am I don't even have time to create anything new because I'm just dealing with these things. So those are things that we're learning as we go along. And things like the document archive, things like the document cloud that Aaron Pilloffer's team is working on are trying to address those things with like linked lists and like searchable PDFs and like things where you are thinking forward. Like, how is this not going to be used only to support this story that we're running with, but in the future, if somebody's searching for this, how can they find it? How can we annotate it? How can they share it with other people? So it's not something I necessarily have a question or an answer to your question for. It's more that, well, we're trying to start thinking about that now, and I'm really glad that people like you are thinking about it now, because hopefully maybe you can put something up on your website that like makes us be like, holy smokes, you know, she's doing this wonderful idea on how people can in the future reference her documents, and let's start doing that. So I don't know if we've worked it out all the way, but if you could work it out and then drop me an email and let me know, that'd be wonderful.
Hi, I'm Jerry Hester. I'm director of the news service here. Just going back to context before you were showing us the timelines, and you go into a section and we'd get related stories that would pop up. I guess I have a two-pronged question. Does somebody handpick those stories, or are they self-generated through tags and things?
No, our producers would go through. I mean, they're found through searches on tags and stuff like that, but they are handpicked and curated for that part.
And is there any ever thought or discussion of bringing in stories that aren't from the Times but are from other trusted news sources there?
That's a good question. I don't know if we're still doing it, to tell you the truth, but there was something that gained a little traction. Oh, here it is, Times Extra, which basically what Times Extra does is doing what you're talking about. And this was a Khoi Vinh brainchild, I think. And basically what it is if you click Times Extra, we open up what other leading news sites also are writing about that subject. Because you have to understand that up until maybe a year ago, people were terrified of driving people to other websites. Like, the whole idea is like, oh, stay at our website. Like, if you leave, we're losing, or we're doing something wrong. And then all of a sudden people started realizing, mostly within the last year, that like, look, if you provide links to all, like, look at Google News, right? They have no content, none. All they do is drive people to other sites. Yet theirs is like one of the top news homepages in the world. And so like the idea is that if you provide an area where where somebody will come to you for all sorts of authoritative news, not just your own, but links off to the Washington Post or et cetera, Wall Street Journal and other things, that can be helpful for you as well. But for our interactives and stuff, they're usually so focused, and we have such comprehensive coverage that we might not do that as much, but it's certainly something that gets at a bigger issue that the New York Times has, I believe, turned the corner and is more open to. Like, you'll see in our articles now, and for the past 6 months at least, we will link out to other stories, we will link out to other organizations, which is something that was previously like taboo.